and welcome to our August Microsoft Teams news show. I'm Tom Wright, standing in for Rob, who's enjoying a holiday. So we've got two Toms today. I'm joined by Tom Arbuthnot. How's it going, Tom?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, so Rob's obviously made his priority choice and selfishly taken some time off. So thanks for jumping into the show.
Yeah, it's been quite a few times, a few months actually, since I've done one of these with you. It might have been maybe the back end of last year, but looking forward to it. And as always, we're joined by our panel of Teams experts. So thank you everyone for joining us in the middle of summer. Tom, if you're happy, I reckon we just get straight into the news. We're in the middle of summer now. It can sometimes quieten down, but we're also in the middle of results season. Microsoft published its results last week, and Teams actually got a bit of attention this time. It's sort of slipped behind AI in the previous few quarters, hasn't it? So what caught your eye through the earnings call?
Yeah, so this is the end of Microsoft's FY24, their Q4 earnings. So we've seen the entire FY now, and they're now in FY25. Definitely, again, Copilot and AI were the top of the agenda, very much so. So I think Copilot got mentioned 42 times during the earning call. Teams comparatively, it did get a mention. But we're past the days where Teams was, the thing that got mentioned tens of times. So on the Copilot, I guess all up results, everything's up. Revenue's up 17%, operating income's up 23%, earnings were up, earnings per share were up 20%. So another pretty stonking quarter. The analysts were a little bit down on Microsoft because they wanted the Azure growth to be slightly higher. Microsoft said that the market was a little bit soft in Europe, but in whichever way you slice it, Microsoft are doing very well in the literal billions and billions a quarter. Copilot, there was lots of numbers given, like not many absolutes, but we got more than 77,000 organizations are using Copilot, which is up 180% year on year. The number of customers with 10,000 or higher Copilot seats more than doubled, although no absolute number was given. 50,000 organizations have used Copilot Studio to create custom Copilots. That's up 70% quarter on quarter. Office 365 revenue overall was up 14% in constant currency, which was mainly attributed to E5 growth and obviously the Copilot growth. And one another call out for Copilot was Microsoft said that GitHub's revenue is now 2 billion and 40% of that revenue is attributed to Copilot. So I think Microsoft are trying to kind of land this story of there's lots of market potential for Copilot. GitHub is the leading use case. Like everybody understands it. People are getting real value from it, but they hope to see, Microsoft 365 and other workloads, when they add AI, they have this big upsell opportunity to add Copilot and add revenue.
Yeah, and there was an interesting figure in there, I think, around Teams Premium, wasn't there? Is that standing at sort of 3 million users now?
That's right. So the Teams mention that was there was for Premium. So it's over 3 million seats of Teams Premium, which is up 400% year on year. Obviously, 400% is really impressive, but when you're in those early days of a new SKU, it's easy to keep jumping the numbers. 3 million is a good number, but it's it's less than 1% of the active users. We're at 320 million active. So there's a huge growth potential, and Microsoft will have a lot of focus on Premium this FY, because that's their opportunity to add average revenue per user, add ARPU to that existing customer base. And they're stacking lots of really exciting things into Premium. So Places is coming in, which we'll talk about this year. Queues app is coming in, which we'll talk about this year. There's a load of branding stuff, webinar stuff. There's all sorts of things to make that Premium SKU, that add-on SKU per user, more and more valuable.
Yeah, I stumbled on some context for this, actually. It was the Ring Central earnings a couple of days later, and the CEO said they're at 7 million paid UCaaS, pegging them at the biggest UCaaS provider in the world. I just wonder kind of what sort of context that gives. Obviously Microsoft Teams at 320 million, 3 million paid. It's not been around as long. Where do you think that does that add any kind of context to where we are with Teams Premium, do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So with Teams, you've got 320 million monthly active users. So that'll be across all the different scenarios, all the different SKUs. You've got 20 million Teams phone users activated. So that means they're using it to make or receive PSTN calls. They've got PSTN connected. And then 3 million is the upsell. So most of those 320 million will be paid in some shape or form, because there is a consumer version of Teams, but it's not huge. But in terms of revenue opportunity for Microsoft, that the premium lists at $10 per user per month. It's been discounted historically, but it lists at that. So if they can convert even 10-20% of the base, that is huge revenue upside for them for those extra features.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we get a monthly active user update anytime soon, or if they're now going to focus on the components.
Yeah, I mean, you usually only get those numbers when they're big jumps. So that does tell us a story in its own right, which is that we're not getting 10 million new Teams users or 5 million new phone users. So those numbers are ticking up, but not at the previous rates. It's going to be lots of Copilot at multiple hundreds of percent increases.
Yeah, great. Well,
there was one more thing that got a lot of attention, which is the Dynamics 365 Contact Center. So that got launched in July, and there was a few cases where Satya mentioned that around savings for Microsoft internally. They said that they're on course to save hundreds of millions of dollars internally for their customer support use cases. And also they kind of alluded to, because it's so AI driven and so Copilot driven, that's how they're going to shake up that market and add value to that market. So again, when we talk about earnings calls, the things that get mentioned are the things that are in focus. So Dynamics 365 Contact Center is definitely coming into focus for Microsoft as a big growth opportunity as well.
Great. Well, let's maybe perhaps move a bit deeper into Teams then and bring Josh and Ryan in. Lots of updates around the client itself, as always, things from emojis, reactions, chat. I think even Microsoft Mesh got a mention. What caught your eye, Tom?
Yeah, there's quite a lot been going on in the client, actually. So I'll rattle through some, and then it'd be good to get perspective from the panel. But they've improved the search experience. So when you start a search now, you'll get different filters for recent chat messages and some other kind of filters and pop-ups. They've added a different notification sound for urgent messages and priority contacts. So you can kind of separate some people and have a different messaging sound if you want to be aware it's your boss messaging you versus anybody else, for example. Turning on and off chat notifications, channel notifications for specific channel posts, which is nice when you're trying to calm down the notifications. And then you mentioned the emojis, so you can upload your own custom emojis. Slack's had this for quite a long time. It's quite popular on that side of the fence, so I think we're just kind of catching up there. The big one, though, is a new meeting gallery layout. So this layout is much more dynamic. It puts everybody on the screen at once, but then it will change depending on who's active speaker, who's got their hands up. You as a user can set it to be 4 people. I think it's 4, 9, 16, 48. So you can choose how many people you have on screen. But one of the really nice things is when a room joins, it automatically gives the room a double width kind of box, if you like, which when you use it makes so much sense. It's like, oh, okay, well, there's more people in that room, so they should get more screen real estate. So I'm really pleased with that feature.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things that as well is one, giving the room more real estate, but only when there's multiple people there's like a group of people in the room, right? If it's one person sitting in the room, it's going to be a smaller window than a group of 8, which is super cool.
And that intelligence just keeps on. It's built in to make those real-time decisions. It just keeps on improving, right? They do one better, discover what could be improved, then they come out with a new feature or new enhancement that helps with that. So I think they're increasingly heading on the right direction for things they're doing to bring the proper representation to people in the room into the actual on-screen real estate representation. But the other thing I like about that layout is the prioritizing of people with hands up, things like that. That I feel like even though in the little who's in the meeting icon there, it gives that little incremental number when people have their hand raised. I see that get ignored or not seen often, right?
Yeah, so much.
Microsoft tried to make it pretty apparent, and it is pretty apparent, but when you're focused on the meeting, you're not looking at all the controls all the time. So when the people that are right in front of your eyes are reshifted because they've lifted their hands up, I think that's going to be super useful for those people not getting ignored and letting that feature get used better. And then on the notification side, that's a lot of cool improvements there. That should make it easier for the people that want to actively ignore my messages, but make sure they don't ignore other people's messages. It should help them out a lot.
It's a common use case.
Yeah.
It's amazing that in the world of AI, we still haven't quite nailed emojis and reactions and notification settings yet, isn't it?
Yeah, just waiting for the AI to take over replying for messages, and then we won't have to worry about it.
I'm curious to see the custom emojis, and curious to see if any kind of HR issues bubble up there. Or
yeah,
if,
they're on by default, which is typical of Microsoft now. So yeah, it's interesting because there's no restrictions to what you can upload by default. IT admins can delete individual emojis, decide who can use it, turn it right off. So there are controls there, but it's an on by default feature.
Right. Yeah. It'll be worthy of its own, maybe web page to get some of the funniest or off the wall that have been seen out in the wild.
Great. So we've touched on rooms a little bit, but there's a sort of standout announcement, I think, Tom, that you covered on your blog a couple of weeks ago, maybe. Teams Rooms, an AI-powered feature for speaker recognition. Sounds like it's pretty cool. Is that a game changer? Is there other things out there at the moment?
Yeah, this is quite a big deal, actually. So for a while, we've had the ability in Microsoft Teams Rooms to recognize who's speaking. So the users have to enroll themselves for voice recognition, and then in the meeting, it could identify them, and in the transcript, critically, it could identify them. And that's important because we're increasingly relying on transcripts for intelligent meeting recap and for Copilot. So if you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 people in the room, it's no good saying the room committed to this task in the notes. You want to know who in the room committed. That relied on a particular set of hardware called weirdly intelligent speakers, even though they were intelligent microphones. So there were certain vendors that had those, but they weren't everybody. Now Microsoft have moved that recognition technology to being cloud processed, which means any Microsoft Teams rooms on Windows, any of the hardware will now enable that capability, which is a really nice case of where customers have already invested in Microsoft Teams rooms and now they get this added feature. Is coming to Android and even BYOD later this year. So right now it's Windows. Eventually it'll be all Microsoft Teams rooms. And even when you're on bring your own device and you plug your laptop in, the laptop will be able to do it as well. So this is Microsoft pushing for more capabilities for intelligent recap and particularly enabling Copilot scenarios.
It's important, right, that they expanded it out for a couple reasons. One, it was a fairly small field in terms of where the certified devices were, right? So you kind of had only a few to choose from. For those that had them, that's great, right? But if you're a shop that didn't have that brand in your portfolio, then this is a feature that wasn't really available to you. And from an inclusive standpoint, when you think about live transcriptions, that's an accessibility feature, right? It is a collaboration feature, but it's also accessibility for the hard of hearing, et cetera. And so being able to open that up across all organizations that may need that capability, I think is hugely impactful and important. That Microsoft does put a couple caveats out there, though, when it comes to that feature. And they do say, look, we still recommend that you consider the certification aspects that have previously been in place. And why that's important to the customer is at the end of the day, you could say, great, I can throw whatever I want in the room, but it does your transcriptions, all that stuff relies on accuracy and clarity of audio coming through the device, right? So if you grab whatever off the shelf and you put it in the room, you kind of have to expect that your results in the transcript and in Copilot and in every place where that data is touched and processed beyond, you're rolling the dice a bit there. So you still want to do a little bit of homework.
That's totally true. Like everything works now, but there will be different levels of standard. If you spent money on the higher end kit, the better mic arrays, the multi-mic scenarios, you're going to have better pickup, and better pickup means better transcription.
Yeah, and this is so important because I think the first round, that intelligent speaker hardware was all for small rooms. There really weren't devices that were designed for larger spaces. And so it certainly is, as you mentioned, Tom, as the world is becoming so reliant on both having and interrogating these transcripts, that it is, it's become this huge challenge to not have the meeting room be a part of that, as meetings are such an important part of our day. And so I think this is a huge step forward. I think to Josh's point, you really maybe even more so need to think specifically about placement of microphones, having enough microphones, the right quality of things, particularly as you get into larger spaces, to ensure that this is It may have been that you could get away with one ceiling mic before, and it was intelligible, but not perfect. In a training room, let's say, and so I think particularly as you get into some specialty spaces, you got to think about it. And there are some important things to consider with this capability around have to be part of the Outlook invitation. There's a certain kind of max number of folks that can be in the meeting and part of the attribution at this point. Hopefully that number will increase in the future. But there's a little bit of making sure that you get educated on it to ensure that you get the experience.
Yeah, that's a really good point on the large rooms as well. It was somewhat ironic that you could spend, the bigger bucks on Shure or Sennheiser or Biamp and have structured audio and have really good pickup, but they weren't ticking the box for intelligent speaker, so they weren't getting the transcription, but now they will. Josh, while we're on rooms, also the multi-stream dynamic composition, IntelliFrame, and people recognition, that's coming through now to Teams and Teams, certainly the Teams rooms on Windows client. I know the Panicast 50 just got certified for that as well.
Yeah, it did. It came through. And then, of course, the remote experience relies on the client that you're using, right? So it's there. It's in Teams, the ability to be in a meeting and get these multiple streams coming through on the far end with the people recognition visible on the far end. It's a temptation when you're looking at the feature to think about the in-room experience, but really the capability in the room, it impacts the people on the far end rather than the people in the room. So it's when you think about that, you've got the right clients that need to be bring support for it right now, and eventually, I'm sure Microsoft will bring the other clients in. But it's a big deal because we just talked about intelligent speaker and the fact that we're identifying people by their voice, their spoken voice. But then you think about a scenario where you still need the intelligence to know who was in the room and what was going on, and sometimes people don't speak up in the room. But from the far end, if you're able to see that other stream coming through, and not just a stream that says participant 2 in meeting room so-and-so, but their face was recognized. And so in that individual stream, who they are, even though they're not saying anything. That can be helpful to someone who's new to the company and trying to get a sense of who's in this meeting and why they matter to the meeting. There's a number of reasons why it's important to be able to identify people, not just by the voice, but also by face. So I'm sure we'll continue to see that throughout the ecosystem of devices. But to your point, yes, the Panicast 50 just got that feature that came through. It's now certified in the space.
Yeah, and that multi-stream as well, giving you the panoramic of the room and active speaker and last speaker, all as individual streams sent from the room. So we're starting to see more genuine multi-stream in Teams, which is exciting.
It is, and I like that combined with the new meeting layout we just talked about for those far end users, right? Because sometimes that panoramic of the room, 180 degrees, that can be pretty wide, right? And you can, if you're just getting a regular size square, that can really shrink everyone in that view. But if you get a couple blocks then you're getting the context of the room in addition to the individual speakers. So, and every OEM is going to come out with their own way of doing that and bringing the best experience in their view through. But I like the way that Microsoft is beginning to handle that with this new meeting layout on the far side.
Great. Well, should we shift slightly then onto devices? Tom, I think we've got a few devices updates to rattle through. In particular, chat notification service depreciation. Is that as severe as it sounds?
Yeah, so there's a few things going on here that we're talking about. So we talked about rooms. This is more Teams phones. So Teams phones got a whole raft of feature updates, explicit recording consent. So you can set Teams into a mode where every individual has to opt into being recorded. So when the person hits record, everybody goes on to mute for audio, mute for video, and then they have to say, yes, I agree to be recorded, and then they can re-engage with the call. If they say no or they don't engage with that prompt, then they end up in a listen-only mode. So Teams Phone will now pop that up so you can acknowledge you want to be recorded. Private line, it will ping up and tell you someone's dialing in via the private line. There's a new People app which gives you the ability to manage contacts on the phone, better call history, better call transfer. So all those features coming to Teams phones relatively soon, rolling out now. The chat notification service you mentioned there is an important one to understand. This is Microsoft depreciating some kind of legacy capabilities in the Teams service, which ordinarily wouldn't be a big deal. But this particular service is used by older Android clients to ping them for messages, which also means ping them for the phone is ringing. So the implication of this is if you're running the older, now unsupported, uncertified Teams phones, so the old Android 8.1, Android 9 phones, these are now end of support, but people still run them because they were ticking along, still working. Those will stop working. So this is September 30th. This will come into effect. So if you're running, there's a whole list of phones, but the older audio codes, 448 C450s, the Yealink VP59, MP52, the Crestron UC2, UCP8s, P10s. These are older phones that are now end of support, but they run on older versions of the client. So worth checking if you're a Teams admin, what devices you've got in play, and if you've got any of those out of support devices, you'll need to swap them out in some way, shape, or form by September 30th.
Yeah, this is a big one because I think we haven't had. It's a big one if you're running these phones, which I think, in fairness, have been out of support for a while. But it is one of the realities of Android and in this world we're in. But yeah, this one doesn't have a lot of alternative from a customer perspective. There's no. This isn't something that you could. It'll keep working, and you could kind of be comfortable out of support. You got a hard deadline that you got to deal with.
Great, that's definitely one for people out there to keep an eye on. Tom, we've got a couple more things to go through. I think we'll probably stick with the hardware, makes sense, doesn't it? Teams displays. Now, I think I'm right in saying these were launched sort of 2020 in the heart of the first lockdown, maybe when we were all remote. Microsoft seems like it's saying goodbye to these now, though.
Yeah, that's right. So Teams displays are dedicated kind of personal all-in-one devices. So, a screen with a video camera, maybe a monitor with an embedded application. And the idea was these were kind of for personal video units, hot desk scenarios. They haven't picked up as well as I think Microsoft and the OEMs would hope. So Microsoft are end of supporting them on September the 3rd, 2025. So you've still got a couple of years. And then Microsoft go into their standard 2-year period of kind of trying to make reasonable efforts to keep them working. So you've got a while. You've got until 2027 if you've got them in play. But those Teams displays specifically won't be getting kind of any major updates or changes. Some of that hardware can be reflashed to Microsoft Teams rooms, so they can go to some Microsoft Teams rooms on Android in some scenarios if you want to go that way. But yeah, if you're running any Teams displays, worth checking out that message center message and looking at the timelines.
This doesn't really, I don't know about y'all, but this doesn't really come as a big surprise to me. And it's from when they first started coming out, the first Teams displays that came out to the market. I'd get my hands on some devices, do some videos on it, and play around with it. And I routinely would get the feedback, YouTube comments or other places, just that I don't get it. I don't get the use case, or I just don't see it sinking in. And I think that both Microsoft and the OEMs that had them did a good job at articulating the intended or desired use cases through marketing efforts, etc. But what I kept running into with just viewers of videos or end customers was I don't see it. I just don't see it as part of the day to day. And so I guess it just, I as time went on, I was interested to watch new ones come out. But as cool as they got, as nicely as they evolved, I think it was just something that I never really saw the end users. Maybe it was IT decision makers and purchasers at the end of the day. Maybe the end users would all have loved to have had a nice display sitting in front of them, but the purchasing was maybe I don't know. But it doesn't surprise me.
I think usage habits have changed. I think usage habits have changed a little bit because when back in the Cisco Tandberg days, like lots of big organizations had users had personal video units, particularly at the exec level, and it was a dedicated device to their video calls.
Right.
But I think now we're collaborating more, and certainly through the pandemic, everybody got used to driving themselves and self-servicing. That maybe it's just not as necessary as it used to be.
These devices were also kind of born out of a vision during pandemic of what return to work would look like, and that didn't necessarily materialize exactly the same way. I think it was well intended around the idea of what would be needed, but it was somewhat speculative around we were all at home. I think when these ideas came together, and I think fortunately, to your point, Tom, most of these devices have a path to Teams Room on Android, and repurposed as Teams Room on Android opens up a whole realm of opportunities for them, because it's essentially an all-in-one device that you could pull out of a box and go sit in let's say a Focus or really small huddle or phone type of room. And I think that's a use case that is popular and growing. There was just the nature of logging in and being kind of I'm going to switch between this dedicated Teams experience and a display, or and multiple people were going to kind of come in and out of it. That didn't quite materialize, I guess, around use case. But yeah, I think that's the good news, is that for a lot of folks that have these, there's probably a useful path forward.
Yeah, for huddle scenarios where you're using them in a small space, MTR on Android makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to our final story then. And this is Microsoft being very Microsoft. So Office 365 connectors let people plug workflows into Teams. Microsoft quite recently announced it was going to discontinue these, I think in October this year. It's since listened to feedback and moved that date till the end of December next year. Tom, very Microsoft, isn't it, to reevaluate the dates? But what does this one mean for people?
Yeah. So these are native connectors in Teams. So Teams built some specific app connectors to pull data into Teams, and they want to get rid of those. And their favor is to use the Power Platform, because that has tons of connectors to tons of things, has way more flexibility, might also have some cost implications for customers. As you say, somewhat not unusually, Microsoft put a date out there. They were like, we're getting rid of this. It's a few months. Move on. All the customers are like, well, hang on a minute, we've built workflows around this, we need more time. So as you say, the retirement date is extended through to December 2025. So you can't create new things on those connectors anymore, but you can continue to use your existing connectors and configuration. So that gives you a good amount of time as a customer now to work out how you're going to migrate off onto Power Platform or some other automation.
I suppose it is nice to see them quite quickly changing and readjusting for their customers. And they get a bad rap sometimes. But
Microsoft do listen to the feedback, and that they're often ambitious with dates of depreciation of things, because they're keen to move things forward. And a lot of the time they end up extending. That's the reality. A lot of these things is it seems to always be a surprise as to how slow enterprise moves. Yet all your customers are enterprise, but it's what it is.
Okay, so normally at this point, there's a host of events to look back on and look forward to, but we're probably in the quietest part of the year now, but there's some coming on the horizon next month, isn't there? So what's on the radar, Tom?
Yeah, so we've got the usual online events. So we've got Teams Fireside Chat. We've actually got Ron Pesner coming to Fireside Chat in September. So he is CVP for Loop, and he's coming to talk about Loop. We've got the regular Microsoft Teams devices Ask Us Anything sessions. Looking a bit further out in September as well, we've got the Microsoft User Group London. But in terms of in person, I won't actually be there, but there's an Australian show that Microsoft are going to be at. Josh, I think you're going to be there as well.
I will be there. My first time down under. So but Integrate will be happening 21st to the 23rd of this month, I think. So I'm looking forward. Apparently, it's the kind of the premier, the big events for Australia in the space, in the AVUC space. So I'm looking forward to getting a pulse of what that's like, what it means in the Microsoft space, and of course on the Jobber side. That'll be fun to make some content. But if there are friends down that way that we've never gotten to say hello, please stop by. So.
Yep. So yeah, relatively light for August, but it starts to pick up in September. I'm also at Ribbon's Insights Partner Conference, which is September 10th, 11th, 12th in Prague. So looking forward to that one. They always do a really good event.
Josh, it's an opportunity for a new hat while you're in Australia.
It is. That's a very good point. I'll get some crocodiles going, and
the corks. That's the
That's a good point, Ryan.
All the cliches.
And it's a bit out. I'm sure we'll talk more with future monthly updates, but I'm interested to see Ignite shaping up to be more in the direction of the Ignites of old, right? Pre-COVID. So that's on the near horizon.
Yeah, I'm excited for that as well. Chicago, that'll be good fun.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that's a nice place to leave things. Thanks for having me, guys, and going easy on me. I'm sure I'll get some feedback from Rob, but hopefully you'll have me again soon.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Remember, you can connect with all of our experts in the social links below, and we'll be back next month with another Teams update.